Welcome to my journey. My name is Zala and I'm an art restorer who loves baking. I challenged myself to bake 400 pastry recipes out of my 12th edition of Slovene Cookbook from 1954.
Hello! Today I decided to make ice cookies. This is another recipe from the chapter of how to use your egg whites, because I still have this problem with accumulating egg whites, so I really have to be doing these kind of recipes more often. And when I was looking at this recipe, I really started to wonder, like, why did it come to this, that so many cookbooks or recipes included that much egg yolks, not balancing out the usage of egg yolks and egg whites. So I went down the rabbit hole and I found out a lot of interesting things that I had no idea about. And from what I managed to discover, like before the 19th century, a lot of egg whites were used not only in recipes, but they were also very popular for industry use in some more developed countries. For example, they used them for photography in quite large quantities. They also used them in winemaking, in monasteries. They used them in cosmetics, in medicine, in general, because they have good adhesive properties. They form a nice film that dries up and tightens as it dries. We even use them in restoration and conservation at college. This is a fun fact. I gathered here my old study material. This is the Craftsman's Handbook, or Il Libro dell'Arte. Anyway, inside of here I found this recipe, which I remember that we actually made at college, and it's about gilding, because egg whites, turns out, were perfect to mix with your bowl to make a coating on the wooden object, so you would put gold leaf on afterwards. And this is a recipe for such a coating. It's called Bowl for Gilding, and it says, after you take your bowl, now you will need to know how to make the perfect tempera for gilding. Take the white of an egg in a very clean glazed porringer. Take a whisk with several branches cut even, and you beat this white as if you were beating up spinach or a puree, until the whole porringer is full of a solid foam which looks like snow. Then take an ordinary drinking glass, not too large, not quite full, of good clear water, and pour it over the white in the porringer. Let it stand and distill from evening to morning. Then grind the bowl with this tempera as long as ever you can. And then you put it onto your wooden object, and you can put gold leaf on. For example, these little things we made at college using egg whites, and after years, it's been what now? 8 years for sure since I went to college, and this guy is still like not moldy, holding up together nicely, not flaking off. So really, egg whites were a good material to use. And as a consequence, because there was such a large consumption of these egg whites, they had a lot of leftover egg yolks. And due to accessibility and of course their price was cheap, they needed to find a way to use them, because no one wanted to throw them away. So they started using them in recipes. And of course, as Miss Magdalena Pleiweis wrote this book originally in year 1868, she took most of her recipes from Austria, Germany, so countries with better industry than our own, which of course meant that she included a lot of recipes with a lot of egg yolks. But the problem was that in our country there was not such mass egg white usage. So when the ladies started baking, they found out that there is actually quite a lot of egg whites which they don't know what to do with after baking. And if you made more recipes, there were more and more egg whites. So later on, when Miss Felicita Kalinšek adapted this book in year 1912, this was the 6th edition when she first added in her corrections, she included a whole chapter on egg whites. And it's interesting, if you look at their background, like Miss Magdalena Pleiweis was more from nobility, and Miss Felicita was a nun, a teacher, teaching her girls, how to be thrifty. In Slovenia in the past, being thrifty, not throwing especially food away, was very, very important. It was considered even immoral if you threw anything away, because the ingredients were scarce. Food was not always a given. So it was very, very valuable. And even to this day, we have it ingrained in us to be thrifty, to save food, not to waste. And even the timeline, funny enough, adds up, because from year 1895 to 1910, it was an era of more modernization, and egg whites globally stopped being used in industry because better materials came in and started replacing them, like adhesives, varnishes, things like that. So all of a sudden, everybody everywhere was stuck with too many egg whites in baking because they were not as heavily used anymore. Nowadays, I have a feeling that if I look through the recipes, there is more and more of this trend that the recipes call for whole eggs, because people found out that it's just easier to use whole egg, unless you have a specific reason to use only egg yolks or egg whites. Because even in these old recipes, I noticed that sometimes an egg yolk would easily be replaced with a whole egg, and there would be no noticeable difference in the final pastry product. So I definitely had fun, while discovering why this egg white chapter needed to be included and why it is the way it is. So, as I said, today we'll be making ice cookies. Let me show you the recipe. So, without further ado, let's get going.
This is a pretty simple recipe since it only calls for 3 ingredients, which are egg whites, sugar with vanilla, and flour. I started off by putting in my egg whites, which I always weigh, and I always take the average egg size. So if a small egg has approximately 30 grams of egg whites, a large egg has approximately 40 grams of egg whites, I take the 35 grams of a medium egg and just put in as much as the recipe calls from me. So in my case, it's 6 egg whites, so this is a very nice recipe if you have any excess of your egg whites like I do. Anyway, I whipped up the egg whites while slowly incorporating the sugar bit by bit so that I got a nice meringue. I added a little packet of vanilla sugar into the sugar itself so that it would have that vanilla component. And after I was satisfied with the meringue texture, I guess, I started adding it in flour by hand. I always do this step by hand so that I avoid mixing out the air bubbles from the meringue, that the final mixture stays firm and compact as much as it can, light and fluffy, not too runny. And I have to say that I really liked this step because the texture of this dough was so beautiful, of this batter. I really liked the color and I really liked how nicely it mixes. Anyway, I proceeded to fill the piping bag, and this recipe actually points you to another recipe from this book in order to bake these cookies. And it requires you to make them in this specific shape of wider, thinner, wider, and sprinkle them with sugar, and then let them dry for 3 hours. And then put them in the oven, first for 10 minutes into the warm oven, and then you should bake them until nicely brown in a quite hot oven, as she puts it. So an interesting fact for me is that she famously does not use any times on how long to cook or to bake, in my case, in this book, but here she uses 10 minutes into the hot oven. So I'm actually very confused. Why doesn't she just keep on using the timer when you actually bake these cookies? Because I really had no idea if they are done or not, because it states fairly hot, and I was afraid that I will go too hot, because usually when baking meringue, you want to dry them out more than bake them. So I am used to baking at lower temperatures, but in this case she calls for a higher temperature, and I thought to myself, okay, maybe that's because they have flour inside. So I just chose my usual 175 and hoped for the best, but I had no idea when these are supposed to be done. I did not want to overbake them, so I just assumed that they are probably done when they can be nicely removed from the baking paper. Here you see that they are golden brownish, but they were still sticky, so I was very confused if I baked them for a long enough time or not. And also, a little side note, do not be greedy like I was and put all of the batter into the piping bag at the same time, because as you see, these are quite spread out because of that, because the batter does get runny if you do it like that. So yeah, I was excited to try them out. Golden baked.
Golden browns.
So let's see what they taste like.
Chin.
Cheers. Oh.
They're good, but it's really really sticky.
Interesting. But I really enjoy the taste.
It's not bad.
They're not overly sweet.
No. The texture is also not bad. It's just it's a bit sticky, so it's like you're trying to eat marshmallows. They're perfectly eatable on their own. I think they would be elevated if you could dunk them in tea, coffee, cocoa, hot chocolate, whatever you want, basically.
Would the cocoa be elevated or the cookies?
I don't know.
That was a bad joke. I'm sorry. I like them more than the previous two cookie recipes that I made.
I like them more than those walnut drops.
Yeah?
But I think the French cookies are still better.
Really?
Yes. I know. I like tiramisu. I like those baby fingers and.
I don't know. I have trouble eating those without any accompaniment.
Condiments.
Yes. Ketchup, dunked in Mustard for me, please. Okay, well, so there you have it. I guess these are okay on their own. Don't pack them with other cookies.
Maybe let them rest for a while before you package them. That could be a...
It's true. These are like almost 1 hour and a half out of the oven, so really, really fresh. Maybe tomorrow it will be a different story. Okay, 1 week has passed and it is a different story. The cookies have completely dried up. Look, a satisfying crunch. So they're not sticky anymore. And there's only one more thing that I wanted to mention, which is the sugar that the book asks of you to sprinkle over the cookies just before you bake them. It does not add that much because the sugar itself dissolves as they bake and makes no noticeable difference in the baked cookie. So if I would be making them again, I would probably skip that step entirely, since I don't see what it really adds to the cookie. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much for watching and staying with me on this journey.